je murzo da nimi zong zo ne monum chembur kan dia da akar tar ngam san to shirmar do tumba de je chan la ki sham sar.
Next, we will begin discussing the use of suffering and happiness on the path. We didn't actually cover much in the last class, as you probably noticed, but we did talk about the most important key point. When we encounter harm or distress from sentient or non-sentient things, if our mind habitually always thinks of it solely as suffering, then even the slightest external circumstance, this experience has the potential to cause us a tremendous amount of psychological pain, leading, why is this? Whether suffering or happiness, if we keep habituating in this way, it will only continue to grow stronger and stronger over time. This is, after all, a natural law. This is something that everyone should reflect on repeatedly in their own lives. The text here is very brief, providing only a short and simple statement that quickly gets to just a line or two, really. But if we take this short passage, wow, the wind is really picking up, isn't it? This year, 2020, is a year that, when the new year arrived, many people all around the world, 2020 sounds like love you, but this is not a year we should love, because whether it's disasters of earth, water, fire, or wind, or diseases, or plagues, all kinds of suffering and great hardship have come upon us. Though on our side, things should be fine, as I mentioned earlier in our discussion. If we make it a regular practice or develop the habit of doing something, I am in such pain, so worried, so annoyed. Some of us are always in the habit of saying these things. Oh, it's so annoying, so painful, so terrible. If we simply habitually do this, then that person will definitely be suffering. Even if it might appear that in your external circumstances, it's just the tiniest thing, in reality, what will actually happen is that it will end up creating an extremely large, massive, and truly tremendous effect or impact, far greater than what most people might expect, and especially great pain in your heart. The reason for this is actually whatever we repeatedly practice, it will grow. For example, if someone cultivates a pure mind, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, manifestation, seeing everything as, seeing all beings as my own parents. Thus, when you see any sentient being, you give rise to a pure mind toward them. Even if that being's actions are not in accordance with the Dharma, or if they really do at times create some obstacles for you, you still won't feel so hurt in the end. I am very happy, genuinely and indeed quite grateful to accept this. Even if it's a hateful enemy, after a certain point, just as it is often said by the highly esteemed Mipham Rinpoche, in the end, even your enemies can become your close friends. This is absolutely and entirely possible. In the same way, if we develop a right view in our hearts, and often remind ourselves that good deeds bring good results and bad deeds bring bad results. Everything is the blessing bestowed upon me by good knowledge, a blessing given to me by my Guru. If we think this way, then in daily life, even when facing significant suffering, but it really didn't do him much harm as it turned out in the end, this is also undeniably a natural law. So as we study this brief treatise, we must understand the mysteries of the mind. So what are the mysteries of the mind? In fact, the mind itself indeed has a kind of secret. If we can genuinely and truly discover this secret for ourselves, honestly, I truly have no real power to cause you any pain at all, while happiness can absolutely last for a very, very long time, sometimes even longer. Even if samsara is indeed an extremely painful environment, without a doubt, you can still find your own happiness. Out of habit, some people really find themselves repeating certain actions or behaviors every day, often without even, always seem to have an expression of suffering on their faces. No matter what the special occasion, they never show any sign of a smile, not even the slightest hint of a grin. Maybe they're related to Langri Tangpa, and it's been passed down in their genes. Aside from Langri Tangpa, except for that one time when a mouse was moving turquoise on a mandala offering plate, he smiled once. Other than that, he never smiled in his entire life. So, well, some of us go through each day with a worried face, always keeping a stern look. Their faces are always so long, just like this, as you can see. No matter what happens, they seem especially miserable. Maybe they really are like Langri Tangpa. Langri Tangpa might not have had any children, but perhaps this trait was passed down through his relatives. Does this have anything to do with spiritual practice or not? We're honestly not entirely sure about it either. But there are some people, no matter what they may ever encounter in life, they always remain cheerful and optimistic. In our daily lives, as we go about our everyday routines, there are also these two types of people. There are just some people you simply can't really talk to. You have to be careful. Otherwise, things can get really bad with them. Everyone around them is always on edge. For some, no big deal. Even if their spiritual practice isn't that great, they have an open and truly broad mind and are quite optimistic. They really won't allow all sorts of unpleasant things to happen because of it, not under any circumstances. So sometimes, everyone should observe the continuity of their own mind and thoughtfully consider what kind of impression they might truly leave on those around them. Because we ourselves might not be aware of our own behavior, sometimes without the mirror of the teachings to reflect ourselves, we might not realize it. We can use a physical mirror for our bodies, looking in the mirror every morning when we wake up. A woman looks in the mirror, but actually, to put it the other way, handsome men can look in the mirror too, right? But in the scriptures, it often mentions beautiful women looking in the mirror. So when you look in the mirror, see your physical body. Do you have any problem? But if we don't have the mirror of the teachings, it's very hard to discover our own fault. These spiritual instructions, as they are presented, in fact, we can really discover our own that we may never have. And to discover many of our own personal shortcomings as we continue to reflect. This is really extremely important. We often talk about practitioners. What does it really mean to be a practitioner? It means not only caring about the happiness and suffering of sentient beings, but also being mindful of our own merits and faults, our virtues and shortcomings. Only in this way can one truly and genuinely be called a genuine practitioner. Therefore, we must carefully, thoroughly, and regularly examine what kind of mindset we actually have. Is our mindset really a healthy and normal one? Or is it that I am really mentally good? Are you, if you don't mind me asking, mentally ill or not? But we have never noticed them ourselves and even think of ourselves as perfectly normal people. We believe everything we say, and everything that we think about, consider, or imagine should be. If we think this way, it becomes very difficult to notice our own faults. There's a very common saying among us, as we so often like to say, that it's easy to spot lice on someone else's face, but even if there's a yak on our own face, for most of us, it's hard to notice. What does this really mean? Reflect on your own mistakes. People struggle to recognize them, and what we are talking about here, mainly some mental illnesses. These psychological illnesses, they are explained very clearly and thoroughly in the teachings of Buddhism. Some branches of modern psychology, they also analyzed it in a much more clearly defined way. Yesterday, I had a conversation in which I talked in detail about obsessive-compulsive disorder as well. Now, there's also something called the so-called decision-making difficulty disorder, which some people may experience. When faced with certain situations, the pain of being unable to make a choice is very real. This too is a kind of psychological illness. In some of our Tibetan sayings, those who can make choices are very happy. But being unable to choose is extremely painful. What does this mean? Nowadays, some of us might not even believe it, but for some people, making a choice is extremely troublesome. For example, deciding what clothes to wear tomorrow, then I just couldn't sleep at all night long. They wonder, does the color green really go well with white as a color combination? No, I think maybe black and white would be better, but that doesn't work either. If the tie is white, then the shirt must be black. When they look in the mirror, it still doesn't feel right. Nowadays, many people even start matching their outfits on the computer. Quite often these days, when matching clothes on the computer, they still feel it looks terrible and keep going back and forth. Some people might think this is impossible, but in reality, a lot of people are actually like this nowadays. It's because they actually have so many clothes, hundreds or even thousands of different pieces, and they literally can't sleep all night. How about these two then? What about those two? Many of us might think that's impossible, but there really are people like this. Same principle, whether it's about their own close friends, the ones they truly trust and rely on, or the tea they drink, or the food they eat, and so on. When it comes to making choices, this isn't really distress or suffering, but for their mind, gradually it turns into this sort of kind of what you could call a symptom, things like that, as you might say, for example. Nowadays, some psychologists have identified this syndrome or that syndrome, and there are so many different kinds of categories. In reality, some of us might actually have these kinds of issues as well. It's something that can happen to anyone. We might think of ourselves as completely normal. I really just can't have such a thing. But in reality, it might actually be the case. So, well, as we talked about and discussed yesterday, whether it's any kind of suffering or happiness, if you keep habituating yourself to it, it will grow. If you often think, everything is joyful, it's all fine, and you always have this mindset in your life, you'll find optimism everywhere, in fact. But if you feel this is troublesome, that is also really quite painful. This is easy to reinforce and boost. Yesterday, I quoted the Nirvana Sutra, which says, if one is constantly sorrowful, it will keep increasing. This line, sorrow will in time thus grow. If we often find ourselves dwelling on suffering, feeling in pain and sorrow, then this sorrow, the sorrow of being troubled, will, through your repeated habituation and contemplation, keep growing. This line, well, I also hope that many of us can, from time to time, often remember in our daily lives that things are actually not that painful. Don't always think, oh no, the sun is too hot today. It's miserable, what do I do? It's annoying. Oh, the weather is bad, today it hurts. Oh, I didn't eat well just now, I feel so. If you really do treat everything in life as suffering, then your own suffering will truly keep increasing. On this point, psychologists, through various types of psychological tests, structured interviews, or carefully designed research studies, systematically gather information and have reached some of the same conclusions this way. And the great masters of the predecessors truly understood the deeply complex and intricate mysteries of our mind. Whether it's the mysteries, he knows the secret of the truth. They knew that if sentient beings keep going on like this will, without a doubt, increase the pain for you, is something that even people living in the world today can still easily sense and recognize. That's exactly why nowadays so many people find that some of Buddhism's most significant and key instructions and teachings are truly subtle and profound, inconceivable, and truly endlessly beneficial. This is in fact the reason for this as well. So, as we discussed yesterday about suffering and happiness, if you habituate yourself to them, they will increase. Now, if we take a closer look at ourselves in our own personal, everyday, ordinary life, do we become happy and joyful people, or you become the one who truly suffers in the end? This primarily depends on yourself and your own choices. Of course, it's not completely up to you, but for the most part, it really does depend on you, on what you do. At this point, many of us at this particular moment, including some young people nowadays, really don't know this. I truly wish some young people today, if perhaps they could have been influenced by Buddhism just a little bit earlier, even if only slightly sooner, and receive the nectar-like medicine of the Dharma, their lives wouldn't in fact take so many detours for so long. From a young age, they would understand suffering and happiness, mostly depend on themselves, and are not determined or influenced by any external circumstances or by any outside factors. So, if many, many people could understand this, then in their lifetime, it could be said that whether things go smoothly or are full of twists and turns, no matter what they encounter, they would be able to face it with great composure and find more really meaningful things from those experiences. However, because many of us, as you know, simply due to the karma from our past lives and afflictions in this life, as well as all kinds of temptations and influences from the external world, at the same time, the media and news bring you negative, false, and distorted informational content, such education and indoctrination. In the end, the dreams that many people pursue in life, when they are finally realized, do not actually turn out as they hoped. And as a result, This brings all kinds of suffering truly upon themselves, indeed. Some people even have no choice but to take very unwise paths. All of these have their own particular causes and their own specific conditions. Therefore, it is still indeed very necessary for us to share precious instructions, and we should definitely talk about them with the people around us openly, words to share with those around you. First, you need to have your understanding and experience. If you have truly understood and you yourself have benefited from it, if you are a beneficiary, when you share it with others, it becomes possible. For example, if you used to be a patient and then you took this medicine just as your doctor instructed for about a month or so, after a month, not only are you no longer sick, but you are actually very healthy at that time. When you see this medicine and notice so many patients around you, I must definitely share it with him so they can escape suffering, be happy. With this kind of mindset, I believe that as Mahayana Buddhists, we all have this intention to share. There will definitely be a willingness to share. So for many of us, as you might already know, even with something as brief as the path of suffering and happiness, whether you have gained true insight from it or gained insight or experience, in any case, you will want to share it with others. Moreover, in the ongoing and continuous procedure of sharing and exchanging information with others, your own state of mind will continue to steadily improve. So, what shall we talk about next? We might not go over a lot today at this moment. Is it that I haven't spoken that now I really want to talk about so many things? So, what should we discuss today? Yesterday, we discussed that this is an inevitable law. Such habitual tendencies will only grow stronger. At a certain point, the main focus here is suffering. Once about suffering, in reality, what was discussed before was this kind of situation. I am always suffering, I am troubled, I am pitiful, I'm an unlucky person, why am I like? If you keep thinking this way, your suffering will only continue to increase as time goes by, little by little. I often think of myself as an unsuccessful person, as someone with a failed life, and you keep reinforcing this habit, then this habitual tendency will only grow stronger and stronger. At a certain point in time during the process, for example, because in your mind, negative emotions gradually build up, suffering slowly accumulates, and sadness grows, then no matter what manifests, it basically all becomes, in the end, a cause that ultimately leads to unhappiness. Then, at a certain point, no matter what kind of information or wealth you receive from any possible source or origin, or whatever circumstances you may possibly encounter at any given moment, they basically all turn into causes of unhappiness. We often see that as we go about our daily lives, some people around us are truly unhappy. If you give them some sweet candy, they feel it's just not really all that good, honestly. Feeling harmful to the body. If you share some teachings with them, they think this isn't teaching me, it's intentionally trying to harm me. They might suspect that this person has a hidden agenda and is intentionally out to get them for some reason. If you introduce some good friends to them, those people, they are really bad guys and assume they're trying to deceive them. Even if you kindly and sincerely offer them something beneficial, with the best of intentions, he thinks that these are, in his own view, the main reasons and possible explanations for my unhappiness. There simply won't be any real chance for happiness to arise at all. Their entire life will be absolutely and completely devoid of happiness because you yourself keep treating suffering as your practice. Each and every day, as a part of your journey, in the end, ultimately, whatever habits your mind forms, it really does have these kinds of functions, meaning it can perform several. If you keep thinking, I'm unhappy, you will be unhappy. If you spend all day thinking, I'm happy, you will be happy. On this point, many modern psychologists really do think this way, just as I mentioned the other day. Whether it's guided thinking or positive thinking, a person's life and habits are closely related to their usual patterns of thought, which, as is often observed. So, these great masters, in fact, even when science, even in the remote regions of Tibet, were able to discover certain issues deep within the minds of sentient beings. That's why nowadays, in our modern society, many people in our daily lives are very interested in spiritual practices, especially Westerners. These teachings have been translated into English and other languages for a long time. They are very popular in the West. Why is that? On the surface, it seems like Westerners have advanced technology with such red hair and green eyes. They should be extremely happy. There are blondes, there are green ones, white ones, and everything else. So they must be very happy with everything so complete. But in reality, that's not the case. The pressures they face, the various kinds of deep emotional suffering in their hearts, are extremely difficult and truly very hard for anyone to endure. At times like this, whether in Tibetan Buddhism or in other religions, there are teachings on inner calm and meditation, as well as practices like exchanging self and others. The practice of great compassion and bodhicitta, these methods are extremely helpful for their lives and mind. That's why they are very fond of these spiritual practices. This is actually the reason behind. On another note, actually in Tibet, as most people are aware, everyone knows that Tibet's economy is, as is widely recognized, not particularly well developed, and its technology is not particularly advanced. But if you look at Tibet, from a historical perspective, it's remarkable. Considering the accomplishments of many great Tibetan masters, the achievements of the mind are truly, one could say, it is truly quite extraordinary. Why do I really say this? It's not that we are making baseless claims or deliberately exaggerating or praising them. It's not like that. People living in the 21st century today can see these writings, and from these texts, we can also observe that in such a remote place as Tibet, over the years, many truly remarkable, incredible, and exceptionally great masters and teachers have emerged. Moreover, the inner world of these great masters, we people today can also, in our everyday lives, indeed perceive this, just like we've discussed recently, including some esoteric teachings, whether it's the great Garuda spreads its wings or the treasury of the Dharma Dhatu, for example, after we have studied them, they have indeed brought about a significant transformation. It turns out that this is the true reality. It's not that we are in any way trying to dress it up or embellish it, some kind of false or exaggerated praise, not at all. We should genuinely and truly feel their wisdom. Moreover, people like us today, you should also be able to feel the power of these tips, inner experience and wisdom. If we can feel this ourselves, then the wisdom and spirit of the great masters of Tibet can also be passed on to others in the future. So this wisdom, it transcends ethnicity, region, and national borders. Just as the great masters of Tibet in the past were also India's Sakyamuni Buddha and two saints and six majesties. The very essence of this wisdom, truly, which was attained through countless hardships, and once attained has been passed down through generations to now. Now, we are the same as well in every way imaginable, truly, regardless of whether we are in Tibet, in Han regions, or anywhere else. If there is something especially meaningful in life, something meaningful for this life and the next, and meaningful for all sentient beings, these are like the nectar-like elixirs for the spirit. We should first obtain them ourselves, and after obtaining them, then we can share them with other sentient beings. Like I mentioned earlier, for example, in medicine, whether it's Tibetan medicine, Chinese medicine, or Western medicine, or like, for example, India, Africa, or whatever, if it cures illness, it's something we sentient beings need. Our minds are the same way. Sentient beings still suffer from many mental afflictions. They are tainted by the poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance. At such times, if there are some wonderful remedies, they can truly make a person's life genuinely joyful and fulfilling. Therefore, as we say here, as we often like to say, as we always mention, if I keep doing this, I will be unhappy and miserable. Regardless whether you are wealthy or not, then everything that appears will quite simply become a cause of suffering. Some people might not agree with this point. For example, a poor person might think, no, that's not true. Actually, as long as I have money, I will definitely be happy. Money is all powerful. They believe the source of all happiness is RMB or US dollars, euros, and so on. But in reality, sometimes when we meet people who are extremely wealthy, we wonder whether they are truly happy. But when we actually interact with them, they are really not happy at all. Absolutely not. Including the world's richest and wealthiest Chinese individuals, or even those people in our own city as well, those who are very wealthy in a certain area, their hearts are simply not happy at all, truly not. Then there are people who typically pursue status. They think, I don't have status, for example, I'm just a small section chief. If I became a bureau chief, I would definitely be happy. If I became a county head or a provincial governor, I would be happy. But when you actually interact with them in real life, face to face, in reality, status doesn't necessarily bring them happiness either. In the same way, some of us might think that we can truly find lasting happiness through our relationships with others. If we follow this logic further, in reality, when you have what you want, if your mind is not well tamed and adjusted, you still won't be happy. In fact, your suffering might actually become even more intense, more severe, and even more overwhelming than before. That's entirely possible. Well, so perhaps we could put it this way. Just for clarity, in other words, if you don't know how to properly adjust your mindset, the happiness that external circumstances bring you is very limited. Is there any happiness at all? Yes, there is some. We can't say that external circumstances bring you no happiness at all. That's not the case. Even in Buddhism, external things affect your mind. Is there happiness from them? There is a certain amount of happiness. For example, when we eat hot pot, if you love hot pot, you find it delicious. At the beginning, when you start eating, you feel quite happy. But is this kind of happiness limitless? It's not like that. If it were limitless happiness, then if you ate hot pot for all 3 meals, let's see how you'd feel. By the second day, you won't want to eat it anymore, right? Outside factors affect you. External things can bring you some happiness. We must know that the happiness you get from external things is limited. If within our hearts we truly understand the nature of the mind, or if we recognize these causes and conditions, then the happiness from that far surpasses the former. As mentioned earlier, the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism are indeed very precious, even though they are so valuable. But if you haven't experienced it yourself, you won't be able to talk about it. A book by itself might not seem like anything special. For example, whether it's such as The Great Rock Spreads Its Wings, or The Treasury of the Dhammadhatu, or The Application of Suffering and Happiness. If no one explains it, and you don't grasp its meaning, just reading it, you might not feel it contains so many real key points that can solve problems in your life. In this regard, the content of traditional Dharma scriptures and texts must have a lineage for authenticity and reliability, or someone who understands its meaning and helps you truly comprehend it. This is very important. Otherwise, as I've said before, some of the Dzogchen secret teachings in our Tibetan Buddhism, if the texts of these some may not understand, only when you have the key instructions will you realize, oh, what's taught here is actually truly, truly wonderful. So in this regard, for all of us listening to these teachings, it's not just about sitting there wearing a mask, sitting idly and letting your mind wander aimlessly. If you don't grasp its meaning, then in that case, receive lineage. Other than that, it's meaningless. During teaching, or as you continue learning and getting more experience, you truly let it permeate your mind stream, or if the Dharma in your own mind become integrated and thoroughly understood, then at that point, you truly gain the meaning of the Dharma. Dharma listening matters. But even more important is to realize its meaning. That is what truly matters most, ultimately at the end of the day. Next, let's just take a moment to really discuss in detail how, because people simply don't know or perhaps aren't fully aware, it is actually caused, in fact, by the habitual tendencies of their present mind. Many people are unaware that our happiness or unhappiness are related to ourselves and are linked to our own minds. But what do they think instead? They always blame external circumstances as the source of their troubles. I always thought that the external environment brought me injustice. The unhappiness brought to, they always think this way. But in fact, most genuine happiness and suffering actually depend on our own minds. However, most people in this world, in reality, the vast majority of people do not know that it actually depends on their own minds in the end. They always believe it has something to do with external circumstances. Sometimes when we look at the news on television these days, sometimes between countries, there are always all kinds of disputes and blame shifting. Or this or that, it's all quite evident. People believe why they are unhappy is from external factors, or most of us think that the reason we're unhappy, why we're unhappy in relationships, because someone hurt me or that someone is this or that kind of person, or the reason for their unhappiness, I have no money, I have no house, I have nothing. They always believe the unfairness comes from the outside world, or that the external world doesn't give them enough space. Because of this reason, I am unhappy. Many people have no idea that it's actually caused by their own minds. They believe they're unhappy. The main culprit is almost always the external world. This kind of thinking leads to resentment toward the outside world and so on. They always think, for example, or for instance, when it comes to relationships, someone is not really nice to me, or, as is so often the case, they blame it on their fortune. Why don't I ever have extra blessings? Why they aren't given enough space? Why these people haven't provided for them? Why has the money been earned by others? Why can't I make any money? If you look at society now, there are so many people all around us who complain, who are dissatisfied with society, dissatisfied with nation and leadership, dissatisfied by colleagues, and even dissatisfied with teachers and doctors. Generally speaking, throughout human history, teachers and doctors are sacred professions, and everyone should treat them with full respect and are truly worthy of respect. But now, because people haven't adjusted their inner mindset, their internal attitudes and perspectives, they complain that sometimes the outside world is unfair to them. It caused me significant harm, truly. As a result, the flames of negative karma and suffering continue to spread endlessly. So what is this called? Everything appears as an enemy. These important points, every single word should be worth a fortune. Even one word should be worth $10,000. So, what does this mean? It means people don't realize it's caused by their own minds. I always think that the external environment brings me injustice. Constantly complaining and blaming external circumstances. As a result, because of their own complaints, karma between you and sentient beings, the flames of these negative, painful karmas continue to spread endlessly as it continues to do so. This is indeed undoubtedly the case. Sometimes when we interact with other people in our daily lives, even in simple ways, whether it's people with money or power, or when we look at people all over the world, no matter how absolutely beautiful and eloquent their words may sound on the surface, in reality, it's truly because of inner imbalance and unease. For reasons like this, including verbal attacks, behavioral conflicts, or intense emotional reactions, and so on and so forth, for all sorts of various reasons, the flames of this suffering and negative karma are continuously spreading throughout the world. This includes the reasons why so many families today are unfortunately unhappy, and in fact most of the time people are blaming others for their own problems, thinking someone else has harmed them or believing it's because of this or that. And after this, what does it ultimately become? It seems that everything appears to you as an enemy. This phrase is very well known, commonly recognized, and widely acknowledged in Tibetan Buddhism. I've also talked about it a little before. Everything appearing is enemy. What does this mean? Those not practicing well, the people that they interact with, things they see, and the sounds they hear, all of them are absolutely harmful to you. This is because of the negativity within their own heart. For example, when they see they sense people harming, even their close and supportive, like-minded Dharma friends who share similar. They truly believe that each and every one is actually even worse than the last. Some close friends, the ones they have known and cherished for many years, have been by their side through countless experiences, supporting them. They also think are secretly working against them. So in your surroundings, except for yourself, there isn't a single good person. Everyone is seen as an enemy out to harm you. It's not just about humans. Even when it comes to other animals besides humans, whether it's yaks, goats, or sheep, even dogs, all of them, of every kind, from the smallest to the largest, you find them intolerable and feel particular hatred toward them. This is what your eyes see. As for any sound you hear, whether it's the sound of others expounding the Dharma, sparrow chirps, the call of cuckoos, or cry of peacocks. In Tibet, we have a kind of melodious bird. Does it really look like what I learned before, or does it actually seem a bit different in some way? There are many of these birds in our mountains nowadays, and their song is especially beautiful. But for people with poor practice, they find this bird particularly annoying. So any sound that we hear in our environment, whether it's the sound of Dharma teachings or even the chanting of lineage masters, say scriptures recited by some great masters, to such a person, it all feels irritating. This includes everything perceived by our sense of smell, taste, touch, and mind. Everything that appears before you, right in front of your eyes, clearly taste and smell bad. No matter which fragrance you encounter or how pleasant it may initially seem, every single scent ultimately brings you nothing but unhappiness, leaving you feeling empty and dissatisfied in the end. Whatever you touch, whatever clothes you wear, anything you come into contact with almost always tends to feel unfavorable or unpleasant to you. In fact, when some of us are in a bad mood, everything in the external world seems to provoke you or even harm you. So what exactly is this called? Everything appearing turns enemy, just as it is, as we can see mentioned in the Mahayana Lankavatara Sutra. The mind manifests all kinds of phenomena and discriminates between various forms and appearances. Not realizing that these are manifestations of the mind, one mistakenly believes they exist outside the mind. In fact, to be clear, if you do not fully comprehend that all phenomena that appear are simply manifestations of your own mind, and you think the external world truly exists, then these external things are just your own mistaken grasping and, in fact, deluded imagination. This is something we ordinary beings truly do not know, and it is really pitiable. Sometimes, when we really look at the world around us today, the source of both happiness and suffering depends on us. If you do not understand this, then your whole life will be spent blaming others, always believing that the external world is what brings you all kinds of suffering. This is something you absolutely must understand. It is important to note that, does the external world relate to you? World has terms, but for the most part, it actually really depends ultimately on your own mind. If your mind can truly open up, if your mind can genuinely accept and wholeheartedly welcome new ideas, then even enemies who resent you of filthy things will not be harmful to you in any way at all. But because of our habits and our own attachments, our minds often become utterly exhausted. What is the reason for this? The reason is that our wisdom has not indeed matured, yet we rely on, moreover, this kind of attachment, grasping, and deluded clinging. An old monk from before used to talk about deluded attachment, grasping at illusions and attachments. It's just like this, grasping at illusions and attachments, you understand? So what is deluded attachment? Deluded attachment means taking something that doesn't exist as if it does exist. There was once someone, probably during the Tang dynasty. At that time, it was the Silla kingdom, renowned for its rich culture and remarkable history, which is what we now refer to as present-day Korea. Back then, North and South Korea were not divided yet. The division happened specifically in the middle of the last century, around that time. At that time, there was a Dharma master named Chan Master Wan Hyu. He heard that Master Xuanzang had indeed studied the Yogacara, consciousness-only school, as well. He had a very good lineage and was preparing to come to China to study. While he was on his long and challenging journey to pursue his studies, filled with hope and determination, he remained focused on his goal of learning and personal growth. One time, it got dark, and he was both thirsty and hungry on the road, feeling extremely uncomfortable. He arrived at the entrance of a cave. That night, he probably couldn't walk any further. At that moment, in moonlight, he saw a pool of water. It was especially clear and looked really wonderful in every way. So he drank slowly and gratefully from this cool, refreshing water. As he drank the water, it felt he had never tasted water so fragrant, sweet, and delicious before. It was incredibly wonderful. He drank some of the water, then lay down on a mound of earth and fell asleep there. The next morning, when he looked around, as he slowly came to his senses, he realized with a sense of surprise that he had actually fallen asleep. The water that he drank was actually taken from those very skeletons and corpses, the remains of people who had perished there. Water that had seeped out from inside the grave. When he saw this, he felt it was extremely filthy. He immediately couldn't help but start violently vomiting and feeling extremely nauseous all over again. Once more, his stomach felt very uncomfortable. After a while, he thought to himself, why the very same external environment? Last night, when I didn't realize it was a grave mound, I felt the whole world was so beautiful. But today, in the daylight, after discovering the corpses, it feels so disgusting. What was the reason for this? In the end, what did he realize? When the mind arises, all phenomena in this world, in every moment, without exception, also come into being. When the mind ceases, all phenomena cease. He came to understand this principle. In fact, everything at the end of the day depends on what? It all depends on one's own mind. It's not truly caused by the external environment, as many might think. Of course, this requires a certain level of spiritual cultivation. It's not that we can simply merge filth and beauty into one. Perhaps we have not yet reached that level just yet. But we should understand that the reason we are often unhappy is because we believe it exists outside ourselves. Is part of it from external causes? There are external factors. But for the most part, it is actually brought about or caused by our own. This is something that many people, including some young people nowadays, I do not fully understand. This is something I encounter quite often in my experience, and it happens to me regularly. Perhaps I meet more individuals than most of all kinds. And I myself am not like some practitioners who become afraid when they see people, immediately shrinking back and unwilling to interact. I'm not like that. I can interact with all kinds of people, except for people who are mentally unstable or extremely frightening. Those I am a bit afraid of. But aside from those, basically, people from all walks of life, in daily life, I am willing to interact with them. In the process of interacting, every time I feel in my heart that having an inner state of mind is really wonderful. Some young people, he was suffering for something. I think if only they could find the Dharma sooner, not just superficially encounter it, but actually truly comprehend the essence of Buddhism, how wonderful that would be. Some people troubled by money, some are troubled by many things, even preparing for conflict and fighting with each other. Every time I naturally and spontaneously feel, oh, if only they understood some of these principles, how great that would be. I've always thought this way for as long as I can remember. So for us in particular here, I also hope that many people won't let appearances turn into enemies. What should we do instead? Let appearances become what? Friends and loved ones. Or, no matter what appears before you, come supportive condition for your practice. This is what makes a truly good practitioner. We often say, don't keep talking about others' faults every day. Are you perhaps turning everything that appears into an enemy? If you make everything an enemy, then this person is beyond help. It's truly frightening. So, in this regard, we need to observe ourselves often. What are some of us like? Even though we are Buddhists and have studied for 10, 8, or 20 years, or have been ordained for many, many years, what do we always keep saying, really? We start talking about others' strengths and weaknesses, their faults, constantly speaking about other people, literally almost all the time. From their words, you can tell their state of mind. So some people love to talk about others' faults. This includes some Dharma teachers and some leaders who are fond of criticizing. When this happens, their followers and fans, what's called a fan circle, as they say, the people under them also become especially eager to talk about others' faults. For example, if I am a leader in this context, can't stand anything, and I scold people daily, then what exactly happens to the people under me in this situation? In order to please me, they offer me Dharma offerings. Dharma offerings. That person is terrible, that person is awful, this person is such and such. Because in my perception, everyone has really become an enemy. To me, anything that is beautiful or truly good, I simply don't really care about this. Because the world I perceive is entirely negative, this world is all ugly and vile. In this way, the people close to you, your followers, will easily provide you with even more ugliness. This is something we should note. Sometimes we can see it clearly. Some leaders, it's really unnecessary. The world hasn't actually become that terrible, but every time they open their mouths, it's to scold someone. And the words they use when scolding are words even the lowest, most uncultured people in society wouldn't use. Those resort to insults. What is the reason for this exactly? It's because their inner world has become this way. Extremely bad. You can also tell a lot about a person from their language. Their words, you can see their inner world or the overall condition and state of their mind. So when we serve our masters or teachers in daily life, you should observe what kind of offerings you make to them. If he particularly likes to listen to, for example, the merits of listening, contemplating, and practicing the right view, words helpful for sentient beings, then those around him will often, in most cases, provide him with such information. If this person's mind is especially negative, the information given by those around you will also correspond to the state of your own mind at that very moment in time precisely. We need to understand this point as well. This statement is actually very important. If we don't examine ourselves, sometimes it really seems as if everything that appears becomes an enemy. For those who practice, appearances aren't enemies. A pure land or pure Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. For those who practice well, this is indeed truly the case. In the same world, simply, for example, if my practice is good, whether I stay in a 5-star hotel or a 3-star hotel, I will be really very happy. If I live in a dirt mound, or like when we first arrived at our institute, almost all the houses in this area were constructed out of earth. When eating, sometimes a big heavy pile of dirt would fall from above. There was nothing you could do about that bowl. But even then, we were still very happy. So if your level of practice is a bit higher, even if you live in the absolutely very worst place imaginable, no matter what. I remember once when His Holiness and we came up here, we stayed at a comfortable and welcoming place in Merkang on the way up, just for a single night. It was something like 3 or 5 yuan for a hotel room. Maybe it was because we were young at the time, but we were really happy. But inside, it was extremely dirty. It really was. The bedding was especially dirty. Even though it was filthy, we still felt happy. It was a bit cold, so we didn't dare to spread the covers all the way up. We just covered ourselves from the waist down and left the top like that. But in our hearts, we were still truly very happy. If our minds are not clean, not clear, or not pure, if they are the happiness that external things bring you, it's really hard. People today believe external things bring them happiness. I'll definitely buy a car, that's for sure, absolutely. First, based on your own situation, you buy a car for 50,000 yuan. But once you have it, my heart starts calling you again. 50 yuan car, not enough. I should buy one for 100,000 yuan. Then you desperately try to frantically find a way, buy $100,000. But your heart is still not satisfied. Your demands keep increasing, and increasing in this way, in the end, your body also becomes extremely exhausted, but you simply have absolutely no limits in your mind at all. Truly, really no self-control. If your mind lacks self-control, it will follow the conditions of the external world, constantly increasing your desires. In the same way, your mind also harbors many unrealistic negative emotions which keep growing as well. This is something we absolutely very clearly must understand. What I mean here is, just to be clear, let me clarify we shouldn't turn everything into an enemy to blame. Can't tolerate anything. If that's the case, it shows that as a practitioner, you are indeed not particularly successful, not very successful at all. Next, we need to deeply, thoroughly, carefully, and methodically understand. Understand what? The reason sentient beings in this world are tormented ultimately comes down to the negative power of each individual's discriminating thought. This is something we should really be clear about. We must not stay on the surface. I hope everyone here, we haven't covered much. Every single sentence is, each and every time, truly precious. We must grasp them, not just in a superficial manner or simply by reading the words. So what do we need to understand? Sentient beings in this world of 5 degenerations are tormented by all kinds of suffering. They are indeed extremely miserable and truly pitiable. So what is the fundamental reason for this? In fact, for the majority, 90% of it is caused by our deluded thoughts, discriminations, and in particular by various negative emotions such as sadness, anger, or fear. How many people can truly recognize this point in reality? It is indeed extremely rare, and in a million, in fact, occurrences like this are almost unheard of. If ordinary people in the world do not realize this, we can understand that. But some Buddhists, some monastics, who have spent years and years listening, contemplating, and practicing, still do not understand the profound meaning within this at all. This is truly regrettable and unfortunate. You have studied law many years. Some people I have converted for many years. About 20 years ago, I had already, in fact, taken refuge with a truly great and revered living Buddha. But when interacting with others, jealousy, arrogance, and mutual provocation arise, all sorts of afflictions, even stronger than the fierce spirits of Yuzhang. If so, your practice is unsuccessful. Reason practicing is all about doing your best to tame your own mind stream. Sentient beings in this degenerate age, whether Westerners or Easterners, whether monastics or lay people, regardless of gender, age, or any kind of person, in fact, sentient beings are still in pain. The main reason sentient beings suffer much, everyone experiences negative emotions from time to time, and these feelings are a normal and natural part of being human. Therefore, the point is truly not to be harmed by adversaries, illness, and other adverse conditions. We often say, don't be harmed by illness. What does it mean not to be harmed by illness and demons? What does it not mean? It does not mean removing the illnesses that have already appeared so that they never appear again in the future. That's in fact not the meaning. Unharmed by illness is not that all your illnesses and all your afflictions are eliminated and that not even a trace can arise. It's not that. The most crucial point is to make sure that they cannot become obstacles to your practice. This point is what everyone must understand. It's not that as staff, there will be no worries at all, never see birth, sickness, death, or that afflictions will never arise again, or cut everything. It's not like that. Practitioners are also human. We are still in the realm of desire, so we will experience afflictions. In time, we will grow old. These things will all eventually happen. So what does that really mean? What exactly must we do? We must take care to ensure that these things do not in any way become obstacles to our spiritual practice in our daily lives. So what does that require? It requires us to recognize our afflictions and to counteract them. We really need to truly understand our own minds. It's not that we have to subdue all external circumstances completely. It's not about conquering every single enemy. It's not what it means. It's not about eradicating every illness. Seven medicine Buddha can't do that. Just like we said in Entering the Path, adversaries limitless as sky. How could we subdue them all? These particularly stubborn, unyielding sentient beings can be said to be as vast and boundless as the sky. It's impossible for us to stop each and every one of them. But if we quell same destroying enemies, if we can truly and completely extinguish our anger, in reality, it is just like having eliminated all adversaries. And for this reason, no matter how overwhelming our problems may seem at times, we have the ability and inner strength to face them head on. And gradually, if we can subdue our afflictions, even if inner obstacles arise, such as doubts or fears that make it harder to move forward, they will not become hindrances or obstacles to our ongoing practice and development. So regarding this particular point, which is quite important, some of us might think, if I practice the Dharma, does that mean I will never have afflictions again? Never feel pain or resentment at any time whatsoever, under any circumstances? But that's not the case. Afflictions do indeed arise, but there should be a way to produce this. Treasures Sutra says, to eliminate enemies, eliminate afflictions. If you want to, for example, get rid of external enemies or all kinds of external obstacles, you need to eliminate afflictions. So what is the way to eliminate afflictions? Actually, in Buddhism, what is the best method? It is to practice the Dharma. Moreover, this kind of Dharma practice, practicing turning to Taoism, making suffering and happiness the path, this is really the best way. If you want to reach such a state, you need to rely on eliminating the mindset of always not wanting to experience suffering, finding joy in the suffering you encounter. Both methods are used. This statement is also very important, especially to keep in mind. To achieve this, it's not that all afflictions will cease to arise, but rather you let them become favorable conditions for your practice. So what exactly does this require? In practical terms, can we break it down? Removal is never painful. Eliminate this thinking. Some people are like this. After I practice, I'll never experience suffering and I'll be happy daily. But that's absolutely impossible and it's not necessary. Suffering can sometimes arise. Let suffering arise, this is the first aspect to be discussed. But today, I want to elaborate on this point and tell everyone when suffering arises, let it arise. When suffering arises, you don't need to suffer because of it. Why am I so troubled? Don't think like that. When suffering arises, just calmly and willingly accept it as it is. This is the first aspect We shouldn't think my obstacles will not arise. Don't think. If obstacles arise, it's fine, just let them arise. If they arise, how can they not become obstacles to the path? How can they not become hindrances to practice? By using practice methods, I can make these sufferings in some way personally beneficial to me. In my life, in the end, when suffering arises, you will feel joyful. Perhaps many of us right now haven't really practiced well enough, so we may not be able to do this yet. But for those who regularly contemplate and practice, at first when you experience suffering, you might feel a bit afraid. But eventually, when you encounter some suffering in your life, it truly can be beneficial. In many different situations, it really can. On this point, let me also just share something with all of you here today. For example, whenever we in particular happen to come across any imbalance or suffering in our daily lives and experiences that we encounter on a regular basis, what is the mindset of equanimity like? The mindset of equanimity is that life is peaceful and safe. When many people pray, they wish for peace, health, and happiness. They often say these words, but even this commonplace and ordinary mindset, which we often encounter in our daily lives, is in a sense still a kind of expectation. It's also a meaningful and fulfilling way of life that we hope for. So what about people in the world today living around us? They get married, have children, and work. This is generally considered for most people a normal way of thinking, right? This is one way of thinking, but there is another way of thinking. We respond to life with a certain randomness in our actions and reactions, both big and small. All kinds of unusual things might happen in the midst of this. Sometimes even your daily routine could be disrupted in unexpected ways, whether it's getting married and having children or going to work. The routines that everyone takes for granted might be broken. All sorts of so-called impermanence or changes may occur. When these changes happen, how will you deal with them? For most of us, if there are no changes, I'm very happy. But as soon as something changes, I become very upset. If we practice, even these changes can help us mature. Not only can we mature, but these changes can actually become better methods for our practice. There's a foreign author named Taleb. He wrote a famous book called Anti-Fragile on the subject of resilience. So what does the term anti-fragile actually mean exactly? Anti-fragile. The opposite of fragile would simply be not at all fragile or brave. If I am fragile, then I am not fragile. Then I am brave. What does it mean to be brave? When I really haven't encountered adversity, I am just normal, you know. When you do encounter adversity, you haven't faced any adversity and maintain your original state as you normally would. Generally speaking, we consider people very brave. For example, when you are not sick, as is often the case, you are still truly happy. If you are still happy even when you are sick, we think, oh, this person is indeed very brave. Even when he is sick, he is just as brave as he was before. This is what we call bravery. But the meaning of anti-fragile is not simply or solely that he's brave, after all, but that in this process, he actually gains benefits. For example, when you are not sick, usually in general, you are in fact happy. When you are sick, in fact, not only are you just as happy as before, but in this happy state, you actually truly, absolutely gain even more benefits as a result. This way of thinking, many people in the West believe this is a sign of being anti-fragile, a mark of resilience. Not just resilience, but also something beneficial for life, though this is what they believe. As for how to actually become anti-fragile, how to achieve this, you could say they don't really have the secret. I have also looked into it before, just in a general way. Well, they say that our lives are quite like those of domestic cats or squirrels. If they fall from a great height, they actually truly have flexibility and resilience. Please don't worry, it absolutely won't harm you or hurt yourself at all. Not a single hair is damaged. On the contrary, they bounce right back without hesitation. This is exactly how they see it. For those fragile, like a washing machine, once a part breaks, there's nothing you can do unless you completely overhaul or repair it. And after repairs, it's not the same as before. This is a sign of fragility. That's just what they think. But in Mahayana Buddhism, not only are we not fragile, on the contrary, in the midst of such suffering, we learn a lot ourselves. For example, during this pandemic, some Buddhists have truly, genuinely and sincerely, through these teachings deep within their hearts, gained a lot of insight. Without suffering, there is no renunciation. Without suffering, one wouldn't wish to be free. Because of this suffering, not only did they not collapse, in fact, they remained completely intact, they even gained greater benefit from it. And the reason they gained from it, we will very seriously, thoroughly, and deeply contemplate its true meaning, whether the nature of or the law of impermanence. All of these are the kinds of things that we gradually come to truly and deeply understand from within ourselves over time. In the past, Lushun spoke of the AQ spirit. AQ spirits. It refers to a kind of numb or apathetic mental state. But the Buddhist method of truly transforming adversity into the path is definitely not the same kind of mindset or attitude that is described in the so-called AQ spirit. It's not like that. So what is it? It is to gain an even deeper understanding of the nature of samsara. For example, when we experience certain changes, through these changes, you come to recognize the nature of samsara. So this nature of samsara corresponds to reality. Every sentient being among us is fully capable, can definitely overcome and eventually move past this pain. Nowadays, many successful people say that one needs to have both emotional intelligence and IQ. There's something called adversity quotient. What is it? When you encounter adversity, overcoming adversity is called adversity quotient. Truly successful people definitely possess it. Either they have IQ, EQ, and AQ all together, truly. But in Buddhism, transforming suffering and happiness into the path is not just actually about transcending it. Moreover, in the process of transcending, such suffering actually becomes even more helpful for one's practice and life. So, in this regard, everyone should also, perhaps you haven't heard this before, as long as I'm not suffering, that's already enough for me. But we don't usually think that such suffering could actually be more meaningful for me, more meaningful spiritually, and more truly meaningful for my life, personally gaining benefit from it all. Ordinary people rarely realize this. So, this kind of principle is still very important, isn't it? Even in the secular world, there's the saying, a blessing in disguise. When we were in middle school, many people talked about this. But in terms of mindset, generally some people think it's just a coincidence, but actually that's not the case. With anything happens to us, if you truly look at it from a positive perspective, there is a very profound meaning within it. So maybe I'll stop here for now. There were more points to discuss, but we're almost completely out of time. We really do have very little time left, honestly. Maybe I'll just talk about these two issues now. One is that you don't need to get rid of suffering, you know? When you face suffering, don't think, I'm so miserable. Can I just pay some money for chanting and not suffer anymore? Please, don't say that at all. If any suffering does come, then simply let it come. When suffering arrives, you should be more joyful. Wow, I'm so successful today, suffering has come to me. Let's see if any of us can actually do this. Suffering and happiness become Tao. We can turn them into part of our practice, right? The reason for this will be explained next. So that's all for today.
Bandharangara Badma Sodargye. Bandharangara Badma Sodargye. Bandharangara Badma Sodargye.